First and Cam, we are back with another episode. Welcome back to our page. My co-host Evan alongside us. National Championship week. We've been away for a while, but I've been working busy. Evan's been waiting on me to be unbusy to get back to doing this. So glad to be back. Follow us on our socials. We'll be back active again there. And a lot of college football news has hit us lately. Transfer portal, coaching changes. We've seen a lot happen in the playoff that's been surprising, but I want to start with the transfer portal, and then we will get to the coaching changes, finish it off with the national championship game, and then in between there, you'll hit us with your NIL theory that I am desperately waiting to hear because you haven't even told me yet. But some of the top names that have gone off the board so far, Dylan Raiola to Oregon. I really do like this one a lot. Lagway, verbal right now to Baylor. He's been taking other visits. So we'll see what happens there, but very interesting move. I think Baylor put together a lot of money to get him there. A lot of people around the nation would say that DJ Lagway is probably a little bit overrated, but Baylor's been looking for some star power for a very long time. Sam Levitt, big news to LSU. I think he has a good shot at winning that job as soon as he steps foot on campus. Seems like a guy that players kind of rally around, but Arizona State had a weird year last year, missing Cam Scatterboo, missing a big portion of that offense. We'll see what Sam Levitt can do, but I think with the help that he has at LSU, he'll be a lot better. Some news that broke today, Bo Prabula to Virginia. I think that's a good fit for him, considering what Chandler Morris did this year at Virginia, which was very impressive. Jordan Seaton from Colorado, one of the better offensive linemen in the country, is exiting Colorado. We could talk about Colorado here in a little bit in the firepower and juice that that school and program has lost in just 3 seasons. Cam Coleman, best receiver in the country to me, is headed to Texas. Brennan Sorsby to Texas Tech. Texas Tech seems like they're about to be this transfer portal factory from here on out, being able to pay the top quarterbacks and top guys in between $2 to $5 million per season. Doesn't seem like any of the billionaires down there are calling it quits or pulling back anytime soon. Hollywood Smothers, a very talented running back from NC State, is also heading to Texas. So Texas with what I would say is two game-changing, game-breaking guys in Cam Coleman and Hollywood Smothers. And then Austin Simmons decides to go to Mizzou to round up just some notifying transfers. Austin Simmons, who lost his job to Trinidad Chambliss after being hurt, transfers to Mizzou. Bo Prabula out. So automatic. I shouldn't say automatic because he's got to compete with Matt Zollers for that starting job, who Mizzou really does like. I do expect Austin Simmons to win that job. Can you give me some of your takes on these guys leaving for some of these schools? And do you think a lot of these guys are going to fit their next destination?
I hope so. Mizzou did just sign another quarterback. I don't remember where he's from, but they did sign one. I thought he was actually pretty good. I don't remember exactly what the name was. I This portal session cycle to me feels like one of the more overpaid cycles we've seen, maybe the most overpaid we've seen. Brandon Sorsby being a guy where didn't really make a lot of noise during the season. Cincinnati was at one point in the top like five for the Big 12 and then kind of
Mm,
lost some games they shouldn't have lost. So there's that. I think Sam Levitt is another guy who's overhyped as well. I think $5 million for him is absurd. I mean, Ty
absurd.
Simpson was getting $5, $6 million bids too, and you saw how he finished the season. Now he's probably a different situation altogether. But just thinking about these guys and the amount of money that's being thrown around, I just the return on investment can't be there. But I also this to me feels like the first time that we are seeing guys being overpaid in this free agency world that is NIL, specifically at the quarterback position. But I was looking at some of these guys. I mean, what's not being talked about is the money spent to keep the guys on campus. I saw Arch was sitting around 4 million or so. I was looking at an on three list, and AJ DeBanza, he's at 4 point something for BYU just to be on that campus, which is crazy with basketball. But I just think that there are a lot of guys being paid money that I don't know that they've necessarily earned just yet. And so a lot of movement, a lot of check chasing, I guess you could say. And I'm not sure that we've seen the production from some of these guys, specifically the quarterback position. But I think we're going to end up seeing during the season that there are a lot of bad signings that happened and a lot of money that wasn't spent. And I think what that ends up doing for the fan bases is kind of like giving these kids shorter leases. You come out and you
Sure.
don't play really well
Yeah.
in the beginning of the season. Like guys are like, well, why are we paying you? Why do we pay this guy all this money? We look at like an Austin Simmons as an example. I'm sure his roster signing was $1 million to $2 million, being the
Right.
previous starter, Trinidad Shambles, comes in and he had to be the steal of the century, And so you start looking at some of these things and you're like, man, like the NFL kind of has it right. Yes, the quarterback should be paid a lot, but next man up mentality, like if you get hurt, you might lose your spot for good. And so
Right.
is it worth paying seven figures for a guy who could easily be hurt or be out or just not be to the level that you think he's going to be at? So
Yeah.
as a whole, I'm looking at the portal class, and I think I saw a number that there were 10,000 kids in the Division One transfer portal, and a lot of that is are guys that are seniors or who aren't going to play another snap of football. They're just like, hey, if I can be in the portal, Trinidad Chambliss being a great one, like, hey, I'll take a shot at me. But a lot of guys aren't going to find another school to play at, or they're going to stay at the same spot or go down a level because
Right.
it's musical chairs and you ran out of time. So really interesting. I think the money that's being thrown around is insane, but also at the same time, we're talking about money being thrown around at like 10 schools, maybe. The average school isn't tossing around this much money. And so,
Right.
again, a lot of bad players being paid. Sam Levitt hit 85 yards against Mississippi State, first game of the season last year, off of being freshman of the year. I don't know. Brandon Sorsby, where did he come from? Like, I thought Ty Simpson would be the one that could have demanded the most money and probably been the most deserved. But
It seems like he's
we'll
probably
see.
getting some decent advice. He got a first round grade from a scout, which if you're a quarterback, you'd probably take that every single time
Is
because
it
he can come
good?
back. Go
Is
ahead.
it good advice, or is it just that this is what was told to
I mean,
him?
it's probably just a smarter decision, which a lot of these kids just aren't making smart decisions. So I think he's got the right people in his ear telling him, hey, you can go back to Alabama or you can go to another school for $4 or $5 million, or you can be on an actual NFL roster with a guaranteed spot since you're going first round and you let your chips fall there. And then let's say the starter gets hurt and now you're in, or the team all of a sudden 5 games in starts to stink and now it's your time to shine and there's no expectations for you. Whether you go back to Alabama and it's like, all right, we got to be in the playoffs or we got to be in the semifinals for this to even be worth a damn. And you've talked about a lot of these investors and alumni and people that are just throwing money at this program with literally no return on investment besides seeing your team win or not. And we're seeing two teams right now, Miami and Indiana, who we're in the transfer portal sweepstakes. Miami paid Carson Beck a lot of money. They're seeing that return. Malachi Tony, probably pound for pound, the best player in the nation right now. And Indiana, who just got this huge bump from an alumni named Mark Cuban, which everybody knows. And he's going to give them a bump heading into next year in this transfer portal class. So you see a lot of people who maybe like Mark Cuban, who you're like, he probably has about $20 million to just give away or throw away. And then you have these other investors who are throwing in 500 grand to 800 grand who are like, I have to see my return on investment for this for me to do this again next year. So I think there's a lot of that. And I think that these quarterbacks who you say are very valuable, you got to pay offensive linemen, you got to pay receivers because we saw with Michigan this year, you could pay a guy $4 or $5 million in Bryce Underwood, but he ain't throwing to anybody. He's got good running backs. He's got a decent offensive line. He's got an okay defense, but they struggled all year trying to find a number one wide receiver. And we look at the transfer portal now, they still don't have those guys. So
Well,
are they going to go out and overpay? Did they try to go out and overpay for a Cam Coleman? Because if Cam Coleman lands at Michigan, he's probably not overpaid because he's exactly what they need. Cam Coleman goes to Texas and it's 4 or 5 stars behind him. He takes Ryan Wingo's spot and he's kind of like a guaranteed number one receiver at Texas. Like that's great, but did they pay Cam Coleman $4 million and they're paying Arch Manning five, and then they're paying the running back about 700,000, 800,000, and they're paying the best offensive lineman about it. So, the revenue share that's coming, $20.5 million, is going to cap a lot of these schools with the talent that they're allowed to get and where these players can shift their focus to. But I see a lot of what you're saying is that's a lot of overpaying. Um, to me, the coaching carousel has been kind of the talk of the offseason, not just with Lane Kiffin and John Summerall and some of these other guys, but the seismic moves and how things have to shift once one domino falls is very interesting to me. And you could see a lot of these players kind of following that. Virginia Tech takes a lot of Penn State guys. Penn State takes a lot of Iowa State guys. And speaking of the transfer portal, I'm gonna have to get a new helmet soon because our younger brother is now transferring from Washington State to Iowa State with his head coach Jimmy Rogers. So a lot of stuff just moves really fast. It's like you look up and you turn around and it's like, all right, Iowa State What are they going to be this year? What are the expectations? Their quarterback, Rocco Beck, goes to Penn State. So now they need a new QB. Okay, now they need more offensive linemen. Now they need a new secondary. It's like these rosters, when they flip over so fast, it's very hard to get that continuity and to get that unity and chemistry all in the same spot to win football games. And then you're making everybody get on the same page and not play for individual awards or statistics, or you got a freshman or a sophomore that's looking to possibly have a good year and, get out of town and look for another payday. And so you have a lot of people that are out for themselves. That's why I don't I don't hate on Lane Kiffin for being out for himself, because this is what the sport has ultimately turned into.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Let me fill in some blanks just by what you were saying. I had a lot of things to say about a lot of pieces that you mentioned. I want to start with going back to just paying players and how the coaching carousel plays a factor into this. I think that as we'll just call them investors in these programs begin to sink their teeth in a little more. I think we're going to start seeing a bit more ball knowledge by individuals who are just throwing money around. Like, I need to see what's going on. It was reported that Bryce Underwood didn't have a dedicated quarterback coach. Like, that was said by Michigan. So he's paid, call it 10, $12 million to come to Michigan, doesn't have a coach to like make him better. And we saw that. Like, a lot of his technique and a lot of his form and a lot of his footwork was horrific. And you're like, what's going on here? Guy didn't have a coach. Now his head coach was doing what he was doing, and so like that's its own thing.
Right.
And then you see Utah and Kyle Whittingham leaves. It's like, I'm not dealing with this private equity stuff. Then he goes, so like that's going to be a fun. I want to get your idea or thoughts on who your favorite or just most interesting portal coaches are. I call them portal coaches going to new schools. Like, who you think are going to have huge impacts and what you're interested in watching. I got a couple on the top of my head as well. And then I want to talk about the
Mm.
Iowa State. Jimmy Rogers going to Iowa State from Washington State. Shout out to Donovan.
Hmm.
He'll get a little NIL check, and it's pretty cool. I got to see the breakdown of how that goes, and maybe we can talk about that in a different episode. Maybe even bring him on. He can chat about it. But
Yeah.
they're bringing in the Arkansas State offensive staff. Basically, Jimmy Rogers left everybody on the offense at Washington State, which Kirby Moore from Mizzou is taking over that head coaching job, which is going to be really cool. And Arkansas State's bringing over OC, wide receiver coaches, running back coaches, and then their quarterback is coming over, to which our younger brother Donovan already knew that was happening kind of beforehand. So all this stuff is kind of inside baseball. But I think what you're seeing, and we saw it with Drew Mestemaker and the North Texas coaching staff, it's like we're going to keep the OC and Arbuckle and John Mateer, same thing. OC, quarterback, that unit, we're just going to go to the new school. And if we can do it here, we can probably do it there. We saw that with Alex Golish and Byron Brown, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
were high on him after week 1 or week 2,
Right. Of
and
course.
so
Yeah.
we'll get to really see what he's made of this year.
Mm.
It'd be a lot of fun.
At
But
Auburn.
we're
Right.
we're
Yeah.
seeing that, yeah, at Auburn, we're seeing that these OCs, head coaches, are like, I'm not going to a new school without my guy, and so I think that can build its own continuity. It's, does the rest of the team mesh? And you talked about how Iowa State. I mean, they were the face of the portal stinks, the portal sucks. All these players are leaving. It's like, well, you get a whole new class of guys coming over from a different school across the country. Like, we'll see what that backfill looks like. We'll see how talented or what the talent levels are at these different programs. Because I saw a bunch of FCS kids from South Dakota State walk into Ole Miss at Vaught Hemingway Stadium and put their fists to the teeth of the Ole Miss Rebels and almost beat them.
Right.
And so, like, the skill gap is not that big. And so I think the transfer portal just kind of shows us that. It also kind of shows us the weakness of these rosters after maybe you're one deep, or if you got a wide receiver room, you got one great and then a bunch of pretty good. But that pretty good could be at an FCS school, or he could be somewhere in the same conference. You never know.
Mm.
So I think the transfer portal is opening our eyes to a lot of things, including coaching changes. And I think it's a lot of fun because, like, when you move pieces around, you see what's underneath, and sometimes it's a pot of gold. Sometimes you're like, ooh, bunch of
Well, I
cockroaches.
think that's a good point. Kind of just kind of this thought just popped up in my head, and it's like, okay, what's your biggest transfer portal coaching carousel move? And I'm looking right at Virginia Tech. It's James Franklin. And it's like, okay, James Franklin, he's coaching Penn State. I mean, he's on that 10-year deal. He's like, I got plenty of years left. We have one bad year. We have one year where expectations weren't met, and now I'm fired in the middle of the season. And you see what happened to the team the rest of the way. Yes, granted, they almost beat Indiana, which would have been huge, but they didn't. And now Penn State's sitting there with the hundred and something ranked transfer portal high school class, whatever it is. And you look at it and it's like, what's a premier program anymore? Like, is Penn State a five-star premier program now? Or is Virginia Tech taking that leap from, we don't know, to now we've got this coach who sends guys to the NFL, gets guys paid, and is a good football coach with the right talent? And if he has that, then does that mean Virginia Tech is a top three ACC program? ACC, who almost got a couple of teams into the playoff, who has a team in a national championship? What is, I feel like the title of premier program is going to take a bit of a shift because
Hmm.
right now, who's a better coach football team, Virginia Tech or Florida? Do you think Summerall is a better coach than James Franklin? Like, do we actually believe that? Or
Yeah,
here's this: is Virginia Tech a more of a premier program than, let's say, like a team that's kind of comparable to them, like they're more valuable than Mississippi State?
for sure.
So
For sure.
in years past, you would have said, "All right, SEC, whatever. They're just better than they have the SEC trump card. They you go there and you're automatically looked at as more of a valuable player if you hit the transfer portal than coming from anywhere else." So that's kind of my biggest thing is like, all right, are these teams really going to get turned around like this? Like we see Indiana, which we'll talk about Indiana and that turnaround and how remarkable it is. But is Virginia Tech back on the map? Oklahoma State, who just got North Texas head coach Eric Morris and just got Drew Mestemaker, the quarterback, who everybody in the country would have taken and spent $4 million on. Do they
Mhm.
now become a place where we have to have expectations because of the quarterback and the head coach, or do we have to give them another year or two to kind of settle into the Big 12 and get their feet wet? Matt Campbell at Iowa State goes from Iowa State to Penn State. What are his expectations? Because at Iowa State, I know what they were. They were compete for the Big 10 or Big 12 title. But at Penn State, do we really hold him to that same, like, okay, now you need to compete for the Big 10 title in your first year at Penn State when you have to deal with Ohio State, Michigan, UCLA, USC, Oregon, who's bouncing right back, like,
In Indiana.
in
Yeah.
Indiana, who is literally the best team in the country right now and will reload next year and should be preseason top 10. So what are our expectations for these coaches and players? Should they be higher for people who go in these tandems for these offensive coordinators or head coaches and quarterbacks? Should the expectations be higher, or do we have to look at these schools as individual entities now, kind of separate from their conference or whoever they're kind of competing against or recruiting against?
I think that we have to be honest about the resources these schools have. I think that we are going to start seeing SEC schools complain about NIL a whole lot more. And we're going to see Big Ten schools not mention NIL as much because of how, I think ahead of the schedule they might be.
Hmm.
And we'll see teams like Texas Tech pop up every couple of years where there's a billionaire who gives a bunch of money. And I got a theory on the money thing, and we'll get to that, I think. But like, look at a school like Maryland, where the Under Armour CEO or our founder went to school. It's like, could he throw them $50 million and all of a sudden the
Hmm.
Big Ten is just a ridiculous competitive, mosh? So I think that we have to look at each individual situation a bit differently because before I would say, look at the conference, look at the player composites, and then I think we can kind of get an idea. Now it's you could be FSU and Mike Norvell and have a ton of talent and be favored in all these games, but your team doesn't never gels. So you're down
Right.
14, team quits on you. You look at Colorado, it's like they're doing really well in the portal. Colorado has never felt like a cohesive team. One side of the ball has been
Right.
decent. The other side of the ball is horrible, and you're firing a coordinator every, halfway through the season. So I think that we have to look at this through the lens of what resources do you have, and then what are the expectations of the fans? Indiana had no expectations. I
True.
look at Auburn as a school that could be in a kind of a dangerous territory where you're SEC, you're kind of a blue blood of the SEC, even though they haven't won a whole lot recently, but like they have really high expectations. But can those be met by a first year coach? Can John Summerall get Florida back to prominence in the first year? Probably not. But if
Right.
he does, that'd be insane, right? Shane Beamer kind of at South Carolina. You return a lot of your guys. You should be ahead of the curve on all these things. He has expectations. So I just think that there are so many pieces that go into it. But ultimately, how much money you have is going to, I think, create the ladder of who's at the top and who's at the bottom. And it's just what a surprise that Indiana, having Mark Cuban, one of the most famous sports loving billionaires, as a
Right.
backer, is one of the reasons why they're able to just get all these kids. Now, Cignetti is an incredible talent evaluator, and that has to factor into basically everything.
Everything.
But I
Yeah.
say a lot of guys who are not good at football are getting huge paychecks. He's the opposite. He will pay, even though they give Fernando Mendoza 2.3 million last year. He might pay you a little bit less, but he's going to get the most out of you, and your draft stock's going to be right at the top. And they did sign a quarterback. I don't remember who it was or where he came
Hoover
from.
from TCU.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're reloading
Right.
right back.
That, right. And they should. And I think the tables always turn and stuff like this. So you
Mhm.
had Nick Saban and a lot of coaches kind of take the exit like, this is not what I want to be a part of. This is everything that goes against what I traditionally know as coaching college football. And at some point, it's going to turn into, okay, is Cignetti the guy that can get me to the NFL? Like, forget all this extra shit. Like, okay, that'd be great to make $3 million, but can this guy guarantee me a spot in the league where that money is now 3x, 4x, 5x, or I can be $100 million football player one day? I think that's what's got to kind of come in hand. I think that's why Alabama used to be so deep in their depth chart, is because number one, two, and three on defense, at least number three's got a shot at playing in the NFL. And the only reason number three is not considered for the NFL right now is because he's probably an underclassman. So you had a bunch of juniors and seniors. If you're lucky at Alabama, after your third season, you would get drafted. If you were an interior lineman or somebody that was really that good, you're gone. And I think that's what drove a lot of players to Alabama. It's like, this guy, I can have an average college output and still be drafted into the NFL very high because of my pedigree, who I was coached under, and how I take care of myself. I think that's what Indiana might come across, is that, okay, Indiana might not be this, you know, great of a school, but we're playing for a coach who wants to win, is going to get the best out of me, and I'm going to get the best out of him. And ultimately, that is to get me to the NFL. And I know a lot of these guys want to go to college and win, but the ultimate goal is to go to the NFL. And how I can do that as efficiently as possible will be the name of the game, because these guys that are transferring three, four, five times, you kind of just get wiped under the rug at this point. The kid from USC, Malachi Nelson or something like that. He's been to like five schools. This kid was a
Mhm.
five-star product coming out of high school. Every school in the country would have wanted him then.
Mhm.
4 years later, I think he's going like mid-major. He was just at UTEP.
Was it UTEP? Yeah, you
So
know,
it's
like
like,
Boise or something?
yeah, Boise, he got his spot taken by a walk-on at Boise, and then goes to UTEP, has a kind of a year, and now he's in the transfer portal again. It's like 4 years ago, that kid could have gone anywhere he wanted. And now it's just like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like they
And
don't, he's just like, there's incoming freshmen that are more touted than him.
I totally agree. And I'm looking at one name I want to just touch on briefly is Kirby Smart, because you talk about Saban exiting and looking at the exit ramp and saying this A, my team isn't very good, so I'm going to leave.
Hmm.
Second, this NIL stuff is kind of ridiculous, and I'm not exactly sure how to navigate it. Is Kirby like a younger old school guy where the way he does things is not going to work? Or is he can he be a new school guy where it turns out and like he can actually start to win? And by win, I mean national championship compete for these spots. Like, is he part of the old guard or can he be part of the new guard? What are your thoughts on Kirby?
I think he's a part of the old guard, but I think
Mm,
that he's had the success recently to show that it's worked. He won those, we went back to back. He's gotten the best talent in the nation. He's gotten high draft picks. I think the only thing that he hasn't had is just a really highly touted quarterback come through there and complete his tenure there and go to the NFL and do really well. And that's the one thing that Georgia as a whole has just been missing for the past probably decade. But that's the only position really. Running backs, receivers, D linemen, offensive linemen, secondary guys, all of those guys get drafted. And so I think Kirby's good enough to hold on to that old guard. A lot of the coaches that you see that have to transform and that have to do certain things that are a little bit different than past, I think it's because they've lost their grip on winning, and the expectations of them winning has changed so much to where recruits are kind of just looking elsewhere. It kind of goes back to the same thing with Nick Saban and Alabama. That at some point, these other schools got elite enough to where it was like, okay, Alabama, we're still looking at it as a premier school, but you can win at Georgia. You can go win at Ohio State. You can win wherever. I shouldn't say win wherever, but you can win at other places. And we can go to these other schools and beat Alabama. We can beat them at home. We can beat them on the road, championship game, whatever it is, they can be beaten. And you see Alabama kind of go down south a little bit when Saban's left. And it's like, you can't, you're not going to be able to recreate that energy and that magic just because you're a school. It's going to take a real coach to come in there and create an environment and create expectations because I think DeBoer is a good coach, but it's not. I think Alabama fans and maybe even the players kind of look at him as this like substitute teacher almost. Like we don't know if this guy is for real about this job. We've heard about him possibly going to Michigan and Kyle Whittingham took that, so that was deaded. Then he won a playoff game, so it's like, oh, the pressure's kind of off, and then they get smoked by Indiana. So now the pressure's back on next year. Now you have to, get a new quarterback. And so there's just a lot that can change. But I think that what doesn't change is that once you're established as a coach and you've won and the environment that you set travels with you, I think that's kind of the legacy that you're going to start to leave at this point. Unless you
Mhm.
do like kind of go out on top as a national championship winner, you retire right after that. Other than that, you're going to be kind of reinventing yourself almost every year if you're not a Kirby Smart type of coach.
All right, so Cam, I've got two different but similar tied together theories around why I think NIL has exploded in the past really 2 years when it
Mhm.
comes to college football, these players being paid, and the numbers that are being thrown out. We're seeing professional money in amateur or collegiate football. Now, one very specific thing, and maybe this one's tied less to the overall point, but I just want to say because it's really important, I think, as we get more into these NIL collectives and the way these players are being paid and how it works out. I think location is really important. We see a lot of guys drifting towards Texas. We saw a couple of Floridas and even Tennessee. Was really important about these schools. And this isn't to the bigger point, but this is just a separate kind of tangent is those states don't have any income taxes, personal income taxes. You only pay federal taxes on income that you receive. And so you look at a place where like Cam Coleman, he commits to Texas and let's just say he gets 3 million bucks. Well, he only has to worry about federal taxes on that money. So a third of it essentially goes away instead of the state coming in and grabbing another 10 to 15%, like some of these other states that you might operate in. And so I think we're going to see like schools like Texas, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Baylor, even win a lot of these 50-50 players because they can keep more of the money that they get. And these coaches and agents and lawyers that are involved definitely know this is a piece. So that's just one. Keep that as an aside is when you start to see these players commit to schools. Like we saw DJ Lagway, he left Florida but went to Baylor. Like he probably wasn't going to a state that didn't have
Right.
income tax. So that's part one and kind of its own thing. Part two, why I really do believe NIL has exploded for collegiate sports has been the stock market. The stock market in the past 5 years is up 85%. And over the past 3 years, 2023, it was up 24%. 2024 is up 25%. And last year is up just about 18%.
Hmm.
And so when I look at, well, being a former advisor, when your portfolio grows at a substantial rate, where if you had $1 million just 5 years ago, you now have $1.85 million in your account, you all of a sudden have different issues that you have to worry about. A lot of your wealthy, affluent people don't have their portfolio in 401ks or IRAs. And so when they have growth in these accounts, that counts a lot of it when, especially their dividends or spinoffs or different things, it's taxable as income towards them. It's long-term capital gains, but it is taxable.
Mhm.
Now, what we saw originally with NIL was these collectives popping up where you could give money to a collective, the collective would pay the players, and like that's how this whole thing would work. What was critical about these and why you don't see collectives anymore at all is they were said to be tax vehicles. You could give money, and if you gave money, you could deduct it from your income from the
Mm.
year, right? And to be an organization like this, you had to be considered a 501c three is what it's called. And a lot of these they didn't pass the legal scrutiny of a charitable organization because they were literally just siphoning money. It was almost more illegal than it was legal. But what these people have done, and what makes it really interesting, is they start giving to the universities. So if you give to a public school that's not a for-profit university, which none of them are, that money you can deduct 60% of the cash that you give and 30%, I have it backwards, 60% of the stock, appreciated stock that you give is deductible from your income, and 30% of the cash that you give is deductible as income.
Hmm.
All right. So if I make $1 million in a year, but I don't need $1 million, and I don't certainly want to pay taxes on that much money, what I can do is I can gift my university up to $500,000. Now, the university gets that money, and I only have to pay taxes on $500,000. And so it's kind of a tit for tat. I get a little bit of pull with the university. I get to pay less in taxes. I get to support the players on the field. And when you look at, and this year in the stock market probably be another good one, you look at how much wealth has been created over the past 5 years, a lot of times this money has to go somewhere.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's ending up in these universities, ending up at your alma mater. If you think about it, as a kid, like the university you choose to go to is almost entirely your choice. And so the
Right.
amount of pride and the amount of just I guess positive thinking, for lack of a better term, that you have about a university, you're willing to give that money. And we're mainly talking about a generation of people who don't have student loans, who had, I would say, much cheaper assets to purchase when they were younger, as an our age, a home, a car, anything else was very inexpensive. And so you have an extraordinary amount of wealth that you've accumulated. The expenses are pretty relative to you, and you're going to get taxed on this money anyway. I happen to think that as long as we have a good stock market, we're going to see NIL continue to go up for these players. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a quarterback next year, assuming the market's good, make somewhere around $7 to $10 million. Here's where I think it gets interesting. If we have a bad year in the stock market, and specifically stock market gets really bad September, October, November, if we're going to have a bad session that comes around then, peak kind of into the football season, heading into the new year potentially, do we see NIL numbers come down? And with a bad stock market. I'm very interested to see this year again, probably not going to be the case, maybe 2027, 2028. Let's just keep an eye on that. If we have a bad stock market, do we have a repressed number on NIL? And
Mm.
does that play a factor? So are we in right now? I think maybe the glory days of NIL because the stock market's so good. Could that change in the future? I think so. I think if we have a bad stock market, we have lower NIL, these players get paid less. Now, stock market keeps going up, these numbers will continue to inflate because money must go somewhere. You have to do something with it. And so the way these universities are structured, the way that these gifts and these charitable organizations and accounts are structured for the universities, if I have Apple stock, I've had it for 20 years, and I'm up 5,000% on it, and I'm up $10 million, I can just give some of that away, get taxed on half of it, support my university. I can go watch Curt Cignetti if I'm Mark Cuban, and I've got my Yahoo stock still. I can go watch Curt Cignetti kick the hell out of Miami and get a huge bump on that from my ego. But then also, I can be taxed way less. And so I happen to think that all this kind of ties together. Healthy stock market, a lot of NIL. If you have a bad stock market, I don't think we see as much. And as a matter of fact, I can almost prove it to you in 2022, we had a really rough stock market, but NIL just came out that time. And the numbers we were seeing, we didn't really see guys getting $1 million. Maybe there were one or two, but it wasn't to the extent it was now. Now I've got guys who I would say most college football fans have not watched Brandon Sorsby play a whole football game. I don't think they have, but somehow he's commanding $5 to $7 million. That is just an inflation of a stock market, an inflation of money that, again, has to go somewhere. So that's kind of my theory on NIL and kind of where I think this is and where I think it could be heading, depending on what the market does.
That's a great point, and I'm glad I clear out the way and let you explain that because a lot of it makes sense. And I think to draw back to even just a simpler comparison is, in the NFL, when it's time for a QB or receiver or running back to kind of set the market, and they're the best one at the position, it's kind of where everybody falls back and under, uh, in the future. Patrick Mahomes set the market when he got that 10-year, $500 million contract after they won that Super Bowl the first time. And then you look up and it's like Lamar Jackson's making more. Joe Burrow's now making more. Um, Josh Allen is now making more. And Patrick Mahomes kind of set the floor, like new floor setters for these positions. And I think that the stock market has a chance to just be kind of like a ceiling setter in a sense. And if the stock market, like you said, is going to be down, I think that's kind of just an explanation or kind of a sit down that some of these players are going to have because they don't know. A lot of these players are just like, I think I'm worth this much because I was worth this much last year and now I'm better and I'm older, so I should get 500,000 to $1 million more just because. And a lot of that is out of the player's hands, and I think that's a very interesting way to go about things because when you put the authority and the decision making in these players' hands, you see what we have now. It's the wild, wild west, and nothing can be controlled. Well, what happens when the best quarterback wants to leave his school, or the coach leaves, or the coach retires, or he's fed up with the fan base, or the fan base is fed up with him? You see that with Jackson Arnold now. How much money can those guys actually command? How much money are alumni and investors willing to spend? And I think that a lot of that has to do not only with the stock market, but just with, the reputation of these schools. Are we actually winning football games? Or are we sitting around 8 to 9 wins and hoping to God, crossing our fingers, we get into the playoffs, and then we kind of just restart this thing all over again? We see it with Mike Tomlin. We can get to the playoffs and have these winning records, but what does it mean if we're going 9-8 or 8-8 and then getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs every single season? So I think you bring up a great point. I think college athletics as a whole is going to take into effect of these things because if you look at basketball side, it isn't the whole roster is making, $3 or $4 million a piece, but there is at least one guy on every roster that is making that top dollar. AJ DeBansta at BYU, he's able to get $5 million, not only because he's one of the most generational prospects we've seen in the last 10 years, but because BYU has investors that are willing to pay one guy who's going to be there for 1 year and he's going to give us kind of this spotlight of a university like, hey, look, we're BYU. We will pay the top guys to come here and play. So you can come here too, and we'll pay you $3 million. And so I think that's how that's going to work. But ultimately, I don't think the money is going to run out, but I think patience and too high of expectations will kind of make these tables turn a little bit. And you'll start to see that. I think that oh my gosh, what's the 20.5 million dollars this
Mm.
that every school is now running on it. I don't know does that number grow to 25 and a half to 30? Do you think that number grows at all? Revenue share?
I think it has to. I think that as the sport gets more popular, as more fan bases get the ability to be a part of the party, like
Yeah.
BYU as an example, you brought them up. Like that's a school that in no world in a 14 playoff had a shot.
Right.
But now, like they're arguing for a spot. You look at another school like Indiana, like they got really good because of the portal. And now what we're seeing, I just watched Nebraska beat Indiana basketball on Saturday,
Mhm.
and it's kind of like, is Indiana a football school now, and is Nebraska a basketball school now? Like,
Right.
do these numbers or these dollars get pushed to different sports? Because like, what would Caitlin Clark have if it was right now today? Like, what could she have commanded as far as NIL? If she had one more year of eligibility. Like,
Oh,
it just
after her
it
senior year, she could have asked for $8 million. I don't think anybody would have budged.
Not at all. And so I do think that over time, and just like the NFL, like and the NBA is a great example too. It's like the sport's a little more popular.
Mhm.
Advertisers want to get in front of these people. These gambling companies want to keep spending money. And so I do think that the numbers have to increase. And if they don't increase, then these schools, these collectives, these agents, these lawyers will just find another way around it. The NCAA can't enforce anything. That's why they get sued and lose all
Right.
the time. And so I don't know that you can even enforce a payout, a cap. And if you are going to force a cap and try and keep it, then you have to also have a floor. And who is providing the floor for each one of these universities? I'm not sure. You look at a sport like baseball, there's no cap, there's no floor. So you
Right.
could be a professional baseball player making $5,000 a year. That'd be ridiculous in the NBA. But like that's just the way it is. College football has to be the same thing. And so I think we'll see some of the structure shift, but there's no commissioner. There's nobody who oversees the entire sport and says yes and no. And so until you have that, you're always going to have this Wild West effect. And just the smarter schools or the more cutting edge schools will find a way to get around it.
Before we jump into the national championship game, give me your thoughts on basketball, separate issue, but I think we're going to start to see it in football, depending on kind of the structure and who's the coach or not. But you see a lot of these G League guys in the NBA going back and getting eligibility for college. And I would say it's probably the worst thing to happen for college basketball in a long time. I think it's the worst thing to happen. It's the worst thing that's happened in college basketball since they took away players being able to go to high school anyway. Because now, as we've gotten older and as we've seen high school recruits progress throughout the years, AJ DeBansta, Darren Peterson, Cameron Boozer, I mean, you name it, guys in the past could have gone straight to the NBA and wouldn't have to deal with college at all. College is literally meant for players who are like kind of like not gonna play in the NBA. As kind of weird as that sounds, like the longer you are in college, the less and less likely you are to play in the NBA. Whereas in football, you have to stay 3 years, and then your success rate in the NFL could be a rookie tryout. It could be mini camp. It could be practice squad. Like, what do you think about the potential of practice squad or players who were cut from the NFL coming back to college? Do you think that's going to be a thing? And do you think that NIL dollars will follow the guys that do that?
For football?
Hmm.
No, I don't think so. I think the reason it is acceptable in basketball is, and this is, I think, going to be a little bit further out for you, But I think in basketball, there are a lot of young guys and parents who get a lot of bad advice to kids when they're really young. And I think that plays into some of these guys going to the G League Ignite or playing in the
Facts. Yeah.
overtime league or declaring way too. I just think that these kids are younger. In football, it's hard to get bad advice going pro because you should have a ton of film to go off of.
Facts.
Ty Simpson is one of those guys where it's like he has 1 year of film. And so he's kind of a tough evaluation. I'm not sure how you could get a first round draft grade out of him, but
Hmm.
he didn't have a run game. His offensive line was kind of bad. So like I could kind of see it, but we kind of know what he is physically and what he can be mentally. He'll take the Wonderlic test, so we'll find out. But like overall, I kind of know what this guy is. In basketball, I think if there was an age cap, unless you're like you went on a missionary, you served the United States or something like that, those kinds of
Hmm.
things. I think that that would be a much better rule to enforce. But I think in football, you would have been in college for 3 to 4 years. If you're trying to come back, I think that would be kind of ridiculous. And you'd be physically dominant over a lot of these kids versus in the NBA. I've got a lot of guys who declared or whatever the case would be, who like I saw a kid who is his second year in college because he reclassified up a year in high school. And so like things obviously did not pan out for him. So he got some bad advice early. Now he's year two in college, and so he's not as attractive as a prospect as he would have been
Right.
had he stayed in high school. And now he'd be like a 5 star on draft board. So like I just think in basketball you get advice. These kids can go so early that like I think it's worth maybe giving them a second chance. For football, you've been in school for 3 years, no shot. There's no way. I don't think that that will ever be a thing. And the other thing is, I don't even think it'd be acceptable in football. I don't think schools would
Fair.
play. I think
Yeah.
in basketball they do for some reason because guys are used to playing older. They're used to playing overseas guys. We've already seen guys from overseas come over, so like it's not as weird. But in football, I don't think that we would even see games being played. I don't think so.
That's a good point. Let's head over to the national championship game. Indiana versus Miami. Indiana's never been in this position before. Miami, you hear about the U, their alumni. You see Michael Irvin giving belt ass on the sideline every season, and then you look up and you're like, "Whoa, this team hasn't even been a natty since 2003."
Mm.
And this game is a tale of two coaches. We were down on Mario Cristobal a lot this year. We didn't really think that he could coach. There's some games in the middle of the season where you're just like better coaching. They're probably undefeated. Um, Carson Beck, couple multi interception games this year, and just a weird kind of a weird season, especially after they beat Notre Dame and all that had all that momentum. And then you have Indiana, who weirdly enough is actually on track to be one of the best college football teams of all time if they win this game. A lot of people comparing them to 2019 LSU, old Ohio State or Florida teams, old Alabama teams like that. But I think it doesn't start and end with Cignetti, but I think a lot of this conversation needs to aim towards him because even with Indiana, they've thrown, they've rushed the ball 90 times in these two playoff games and only thrown the ball 36 times. Going back to the Big Ten championship game, they've run the ball 124 times to 59 passes. So we give Mendoza the Heisman, and I think he is the best quarterback. He's obviously the most deserving quarterback. But Cignetti, who has claimed the best coach in the nation crown pretty quickly this year, doesn't seem like he has any interest of being timid or holding back anything or nothing's keeping him from trying to score 50 points on Miami. And I think that's been the same mission he's had every single game this year. And so give me your thoughts on Indiana heading into this title game. What should their mindset be? And then on the other side, Miami, who hasn't been to this game since '03, since they last had NFL legends on their team, and they're coming in with kind of the underdog mentality playing against Indiana.
I think Indiana has played in a number of football games that you could have doubted them, and they came out victorious in like a monster way.
Mm.
They went to Oregon, and this was actually a best bet of mine for us was it was Oregon or Indiana, like they were -7 or +7,
Mm.
and they went in there and kind of stomped Oregon. So they beat a team that had a better roster than them on the road. Penn State doesn't get credit because they weren't any good this year, but that roster is better than Indiana. Then they play Ohio State, and they kind of stifle Ohio State. They really have to do a whole lot. It almost
Right.
felt like Cignetti was playing the Ryan Day game where it was like, I'm not going to open up my bag of tricks against you guys. I don't have to. And so to see that, I don't know that Miami's physicality or speed can really surprise Indiana at this point. I think Miami's very physical in the trenches on both sides, but I don't know that Indiana has. I think Indiana's seen this team before. On the other side, I have concerns about health and injuries with Miami. There are some guys on the defensive end that are hurt.
Hmm.
I know Ruben Bain didn't really play. They had a couple corners go out, maybe a safety, some other interior lineman went down as well. So hopefully those guys can be healthy. But if they're not, like huge edge to Indiana. I look at Indiana like a team that plays offense, kind of like those old Texas Tech offense. No, that's a bad statement. I look at Indiana like they play defense like they're Iowa. They're never out of position, but they've got the athletes of Ohio State. And that's just the way that they come off to me. And so I look at this game. I think it's about right. 7.5 points, Indiana being favored. That's about right. I look at this and think that Indiana trusts their quarterback more than Miami would and does. And so if Miami is forced to throw the football a lot, I think that plays into Indiana's hands very well. I think Dante Moore is a better quarterback than Carson Beck. And
Right.
I love Carson Beck. This was the season that I was hoping he would
Absolutely.
have, and he
Yeah.
did. And so that's great. But I just think I watched how confused Dante Moore was back there. Every snap it felt like. And I just feel Carson Beck's going to be about the same. He's a little less mobile and he has great
Yeah.
weapons though. So like it could be that could be an equalizer.
Well, I think this is kind of like what happens in the Super Bowl is that you get that extra week of scouting, you get an extra week of film, extra week of rest, preparation, all that. So the most prepared, best coach team is usually, at least in the first half, is gonna be better. Now you can tell me about Patriots Falcons 28-3. Yes, Tom Brady was the orchestrator of that, but you give Cignetti an extra time to scout your quarterback and to scout your offense. I just think that is a hard and difficult position to be in. And Miami's offensive line has been good, but their heart and soul of their offense has been Mark Fletcher Jr. and Malachi Tony, and most importantly, Mark Fletcher Jr., who's gone for 395 in three playoff games. He looks like, he's gearing himself to be an NFL back. He looks like an all-purpose back. Looks really good. And then you have Malachi Tony, who last year Jeremiah Smith was, as a freshman, was probably the best football player in the nation, and they won. And this year, Malachi Tony looks like he's not as good as Jeremiah Smith, but he's like 1B. Like you could take Ryan Williams off the cover of NCAA and put him on there and you'd be very fine. Like he's really gonna be an interesting prospect to look forward to for the next couple of years, considering hopefully he has a good quarterback. Regardless, I think that kid could get drafted after this year. Like he's that
Mm.
good. And so Miami's offensive line played really well against Ohio State, and I think that Ohio State game is definitely the game that Indiana's watching. Like, okay, we beat Ohio State, but Miami took care of Ohio State in a way that I don't think anybody saw coming. Like, I think people in the Big Ten championship were giving Indiana some favors. I think Ohio State looked like an unbeatable team, but it wasn't a shocker that Indiana played really well and ended up winning that game. I do think it was a shocker that Miami played as well as it did against Ohio State and just stopped them from doing anything remotely like consistent at all. Throwing the ball, running the ball, their defense looked sloppy out of position, penalties, and then Ryan Day in a big game against Mario Cristobal, who hadn't been there in a while, kind of just folded a little bit. And that's not going to happen with Cignetti. He's going to have that same face, whether it's 35-0 or 28-28. He's going to look the same. His play calling is never going to change. To me, this whole game is about Carson Beck and how he handles the pressure of all eyes being on him. Because Carson Beck has people like you who really wanted to see him do really well this year, have redemption arc, all of that. But the majority of people who watch Carson Beck play football, they don't like him. Whether it's how he plays, his tattoos, his face, what happened with one of those Cavender twins or something off the field, all the money that he's gotten from Miami, from flaming out at Georgia, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of people who have a good time hating on that kid. And so how he handles and responds to this Indiana defense is going to tell us everything we need to know. Dante Moore throws a pick six the first play of the game. You can see his body language was defeated right after that. His body language was crushed. And Carson Beck is the same way where you kind of see it on his face how he's feeling and how in tune he is with the game. And so if he's going to start the game off with a couple punts or a couple bad throws and he's getting hit, like he hasn't been hit before this year. He's seeing blitzes that he hasn't seen all year. That game could get really ugly for Miami very quick. And I think it's going to be up to Miami's offensive line to keep him back there and to, he throws the ball really quick, short, intermediate throws, drags across the middle. Malachi Tony, is more so relied on for his yards after the catch
Mhm.
than anything else. They have dynamic guys, like I said, with Mark Fletcher Jr., but
CJ
I just
Daniels
am,
is a guy too.
yeah, and I'm just worried about Indiana having to face Curt Cignetti, who's had so much time to prepare for them. And then you mentioned the fact that Miami has been hurt as well.
I think if you're Curt Cignetti, the Ohio State film is good. I think that Texas A&M film is the one you watch. That was a game where if Marcel Reed could have just been like this much better, maybe Colin Klein didn't take the K-State job. Like that's a team that they beat Miami, and then now all of a sudden we're talking about somebody different playing against Indiana. I
Right.
think that's the film that you're going to watch, and I think that's a good film for Miami to self-scout from as well because they did not play the best ball, and they said Carson Beck, you're just not going to lose us
Sure.
this game, and that's what they
Yeah.
tried to do. I think Malachi Tony can be bottled up. I don't know for how long. And so the question is it going to be a situation where Indiana's up like 4 points and then he finally gets loose and breaks one? Or is it's a 14-point game and he finally gets one and now we kind of have this like back and forth shootout style going into the fourth quarter? I don't know. I don't want to be the team going up against the best coached football team maybe ever.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would put another coaching staff or another head coach. I love Nick Saban. I don't
Mhm.
know that he would like player for
Could he
player,
do
roster for
this? Yeah.
roster. I don't think that he could do what Kirsten
Right.
Netty's done. And so I don't know that I want to be in front of that. The edge I think Miami could have is being able to run the ball. Ohio State was never very good at that. Texas A&M didn't really even run the football very well. They were always hurt at the running back position. So I look at if Miami can get the ground game going, which Mark Fletcher, like you said, can get going, can break loose. If they can just make some holes, I think they've got a shot. We saw Oregon do it a couple times, but it wasn't consistent enough for them, and they always kind of knew they had to throw the football.
Mhm.
So I think if you play a mistake-free-ish game the first half, you kind of lean on Indiana, you've got a shot.
Yeah. I think the
I,
way that Indiana wants to win, though, is they're showing it. Even in some of Mendoza's best games, he's thrown the ball less than 20, 22 times. They want to run the football and they want to beat you up at the line of scrimmage. And Ruben Bain, it's going to be a big test for him. I don't know how healthy he is, but everybody's going to be looking at him like, hey, it's you versus Mendoza at the line of scrimmage. And if you're going to win that battle against the tackle every single time, then your team's going to have a shot on defense. But if we allow 6'5" Mendoza to just sit there and be able to just pick you off. Like this is an NFL guy. This guy's going number one in the NFL draft. Win or lose, this guy is going number one in the draft to the Raiders. So you have an opportunity, Miami defense, to really step up and show what adjustments you can make on the fly because I can guarantee you Indiana has every single defensive front that they're ever going to see from Miami noted already. And I just, I don't know. My biggest question for you, though, is have we, and you mentioned Nick Saban and his ability, how many coaches would have the ability to take Indiana from where they were to what they are now? What do you think of this turnaround? Is this turnaround the biggest turnaround you've ever seen in college football history, in sports history? Like, where does this rank among the best turnarounds in sports? And just to give you kind of an example of what we've seen recently in college football, there's two instances. 2021 TCU went from 5-7 to college football playoff runner up. They lost to Georgia like by like 60, but that's okay. I mean, they went 5-7 the year before. And then you have to go all the way back to the 80s and 90s where Bill McCartney took Colorado team who had just won 14 games in 6 seasons and ended up going to, and being the consensus national champion in 1990. Those are really the only best examples that you can give. Now, Alabama or Nick Saban going from the NFL to Alabama, and Alabama a couple years later turning into a perennial powerhouse for a decade. I guess you could put that up there, but Alabama's always been kind of a team to or a place to be if you are even just decent in college football. But Indiana is Bobby Knight and everything else clear out of the way because nothing else has ever mattered here.
Literally at all. I think it's the greatest turnaround in sports we've ever seen. And the reason I feel this way is in the two examples you named, what didn't exist were people being able to DM, call, text your players, your high school coaches, and offer them money to leave and come to their school. That did not exist. You could not do that. You could not poach players. That was not a thing that was even legal at the time.
Right.
And so for that to be the case, for Cignetti to have the success he did in year one, and then to basically shed a lot of those players and bring in some more guys, which he had guys leave too, and do it again. Yeah, I just don't believe that the level of difficulty could have been any higher for this. And so I will give him the number one spot there. My question to you is, does Indiana have, first off, Indiana has one of the most recognizable logos in sports.
Right.
I was looking at the other day, I was like, this is like childhood. Does Indiana have the chance to be like the greatest basketball, football school in the country for like the next 10 years, if you look at it?
Wow, that's a good question because my answer is going to be no, because Florida just won a national title in basketball. And they went from, 06, 07 back-to-back champions to kind of a lull in basketball. And then a couple years later, football ends up winning. They have Tim Tebow. They have a and then basketball kind of picked up again. And we really haven't seen Florida be that relevant in football in a while. But they have the shot to always be in that contention. Indiana's basketball has gotten so bad that I don't think it's possible. I think it's the biggest turnaround as far as identity of a school. Whereas the first football game next year is going to set an attendance record. They might have to build more seats in that football stadium in a couple of years if Cignetti's going to be there. Whereas basketball, it's like Assembly Hall is kind of like a ghost town. Like Indiana would be better off like almost building a whole new arena for their basketball team just to get that old like just to get that not old bad energy out, but you're never going to be able to replicate 32 and 0 Bobby Knight team in the 70s or in the 80s or what Indiana looked like in the early 90s. Like that's just never going to happen because of the dynamics of what college basketball is now. Indiana is just not a spot like that unless they were to get a legendary coach, which probably not going to Indiana unless Mark Cuban decides to fund the basketball team, then maybe you have a shot. But I think what can't be overstated, and it definitely isn't overstated by us. It's just how good of a coach Cignetti is. Like, I don't
Mhm.
think people understand that if Cignetti, they're lucky he's at Indiana. Like we are very lucky he's not at Texas or Florida or Auburn or Georgia.
Yeah.
God, heaven forbid the guy went to Georgia after Kirby Smart were to retire or something like that. I mean, what are we talking about? That guy would be the front runner for coach of the year and have AP number one team in the preseason every single year. And I think that's how good he is. And I think what the NIL and the transfer portal has also kind of unlocked is how good of a coach are you actually? Like, how good of a coach are you? Are you a guy that calls plays? Are you a schematics guy? Or can you just curate an environment for good athletes and other good coaches to come in here and shine? And I think Cignetti is both. And I think if you're going to be that elite guy, you have to be elite in both in recruiting and the X's and O's, the fanfare, the environment that you create at the school, what you bring to the table, just pedigree wise, the whole nine. And Cignetti being a guy who wasn't a major sports name while he was a player, and he wasn't a major name while he was coaching anywhere else. So for him to just jump onto the scene like this, I think it's one of the most unprecedented things we've ever seen in sports. And the guy is so consistent in how he carries himself that I think that's why we downplay it, is because he's not out here boasting. He's not out here, calling himself the greatest thing since sliced bread. He's literally just winning games and acting like he expects to win the games.
He
That's it.
told you what he was going to do, and then he
Yeah.
actually did it.
And he does it.
I couldn't be more impressed by him and just the entire thing that he has built, which we're kind of like preaching to the choir. I think everybody kind of
Right.
understands that.
Mhm.
And it's almost you almost forget how bad Indiana football was, like because of how quickly he turned the thing
Mhm.
around. And I look at there are a lot of coaches who are on hot seats that they should not be on because of Curt Cignetti. It is going to be
Facts.
called the Curt Cignetti like stinge or
The
rule
Cignetti
or
rule.
whatever.
It's gonna be yeah, he's created a whole precedent of coaching. Yes.
And I it just can't be understated. Now, what I think is even more impressive this year or than this year is the following is previous year. I don't know that Mark Cuban gave a healthy donation
Right.
the year before. And so you can people want to take away because they know Mark Cuban gave money this year, but the year before he took a bunch of guys who you don't know the names of to the
James
playoffs.
Madison. Right.
And so you've got guys who aren't playing college, who aren't playing in the NFL on that roster, and they got beat up by Notre Dame, but like year one, he like sets the tone. And then now year two, like we're talking about a national
I think that's the
championship.
biggest thing is that he has set a tone. He didn't just kind of luck up and have a great quarterback and a great offensive line, and then they got lucky with some fumbles and turnovers. No, like he set the tone with this is what you should expect from Indiana for years on out. Like I think now he's kind of set the precedent. Like if Indiana doesn't make the playoff next year, we'll be kind of shocked.
Well, I think you start to look at some of these one and done coaches, a Gene Chizik as an example, Ed Orgeron as an example. These guys win, and then all of a sudden they kind of like fade off into the background. They're kind of content
Maybe they
with,
take their foot off the gas pedal a little bit. I think
and
Coach
it,
Orgeron, I think that happened to him a lot. He lost a lot of talent, but
no, for
yeah,
sure, he did. But and I can't you can't fault that. And he couldn't reload with the transfer portal like you can now. So
right.
like that is a fair point. But there's something about Cignetti that just says like he's in the final 10 years of his coaching career. He's not going to go on much longer. And so I think it really is like pedal to the metal, foot on throat. Like we are going to be what Ohio State is in the Big Ten at Indiana and Bloomington. It's just what
Mhm.
we are.
I think that's incredible. I think that should be inspiring to other programs as well. Is like, hey, we just need to find the right guy, and if we do find the right guy, let's not wait around and let's pay him an extension because Cignetti could have easily waited 2 or 3 years and then gotten the call or text from Texas or Ohio State or Alabama or anywhere like that and be like, you know what? I know I'm good enough to go there. I'll go there. No, Indiana said we have never been to the playoffs. We've never seen these heights before. Let's ink this deal now so that this guy is around forever. And, he's a guy that's, potentially gets his name on the stadium, name on the field, something like that, because he's that good. And I think Indiana knows what they have and they're not willing to let it go. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about all of this is that they got him locked down for multiple years on end. This is not a guy we're going to see like, ooh, should he take Ryan Day's job at Ohio State if they flame out? Or should he be the next on up after DeBoer? No, this guy is Indiana football, and he's going to take Indiana football to the heights that he wants to. And if we look up 5 years from now and he's got 2 or 3 rings under his belt, then we're going to have some conversations about all-time coaching
I think
in
this
all
season,
sports.
yeah, I agree, and I think this season gave us two kind of Cinderella stories, if you would. Cignetti was I think unexpected because we thought he might got lucky that first year, but then now this year
Mhm.
here he is, and I think Trinidad Chambliss as
Absolutely.
another guy going from D2, not really getting a shot, kind of the Tom Brady route. The starter gets injured, you step in, and that spot is never coming back.
I wish they had given him another year just
And
for
I think he can
his
fight for
defense.
it. I think he can. I think
He
he'll end
is
up getting
going
it.
to, and I think they should end up giving it to him for the simple fact that he came from D2, and it's like I get
That
1 year to kind of just show who I am. Like I give me one more year, and I'll have Ole Miss like right back in this spot.
Well,
So
the judge for his case went to Ole Miss, so I think that's kind of a foregone conclusion. But I think it just is inspiring for some of
no,
these coaches, some of these players that it's like it doesn't really matter where you start. Like talent is talent, and if you're given an opportunity, you will be given all of the resources to get it done. And I can't think of a better football season for college football than those two
yeah,
individual
man.
stories, Signetti and Trinidad Chambliss, and just what they have meant to the sport and what they've done and what they've been able to create for fan bases that you are one guy away from your team being considered one of the best in the country.
That 100% right. Let's exit on this, and just in case we don't record before the national championship again, give me your prediction. Indiana, Miami, January 19th, Monday night. What is the final score prediction, and what are the headlines coming from this game?
34-17 Indiana, they cover. Cincinnati, the greatest coach ever in the NIL era. And who's Miami's quarterback for next year? Because Mario Cristobal is going to get that extension as he deserves,
Absolutely.
which I didn't see coming before the year started, but I think
Mhm.
that's where we are.
Yeah. I don't see a situation where Indiana doesn't put up more than 35 points. Um, I'm going, I'm going to Indiana 41, Miami 24. And I think the game is a little more lopsided even than that score indicates. Maybe Miami gets a late touchdown or something. Here's my Alberto Mendoza. He'll be taking snaps in this game. He'll be taking it because I think Indiana, they're just too good. The momentum is too strong. At the end of this game, we're talking about 2019 LSU versus 2025 Indiana. Who's the better team? The quarterback, I think a lot of that has to do with who Joe Burrow's receivers were. Obviously, Joe Burrow is going to go on to be a Hall of Fame NFL quarterback. We don't know about Mendoza. But I think what comes from this game is ultimately reeling everybody in back on college football. A lot of people were out because of NIL, because of players can go anywhere, players getting money, players driving Lamborghinis on campus, whatever. I think if Indiana wins this football game, I think it reels everybody in back on college football, and the popularity of the sport just bursts even crazier if Indiana wins. Now, if Miami wins, fine, that's okay. A lot of alumni will be happy, but it's just like a Miami national championship. Like, okay, cool. They could have won five more in the past 20 years and it would have been like whatever. But Indiana winning does something special for college football. And I think that the outcome of this game will take college football to new heights. And that's that on that. This is
All right,
First in
cool.
Cam. Thanks for tuning into this episode. And we'll be back with our thoughts on the national championship game to give a preview and then much more coming from this offseason.